We've been talking about poetry, novels, even some short stories, and now we're going to have a dramatic moment. I want to introduce Michael John O'Neill, and who is the partner, husband of someone we've already heard about, Lyndon Bickett. And this was on, well, he can explain it better than I can, but during COVID, there were these small little plays that were done on BBC 4, 3, 2, one of those BBCs in England. And it's a fascinating piece. And obviously, Michael's done a lot of other work. We've asked basically this short piece, and then asked Michael and Lyndon perhaps just to speak about what does it mean to be a creative writer and a person of faith in Scotland and coming from a Northern Irish background. All right, so I'll let Michael do the rest of the introductions.
Yeah, hello, I'm Michael John O'Neill. I'm your theatre delegation. We're a very small department. So what you're going to get here is a self-contained, complete piece, a monologue that was originally commissioned by National Theatre of Scotland and the BBC and Citizens Theatre, and directed by the director Dominic Hill, who's the artistic director of the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow. And when it was originally made as a filmed monologue, it was as part of a series called Scenes for Survival, which was put together right at the beginning of lockdown, one of theatre's responses to the crisis of not being able to do the thing that they usually do, which is live work. So this piece has never been performed live. It was recorded and put out on the internet and on the BBC. So this is the first time, 3 years later, that our star of it, Maureen Beattie, who's about to come up, will be performing it with a live audience. So thank you very much for being that live audience. Maureen.
We weren't a year out from burying our Marie when I started thinking about our neighbours over the road, the couple at the window up there. Him, small, next to her, and his hands altogether too cautious with his hands, but still excited, and her no time for it. Already, I could tell, but still close they were, close on each other. And that was even before the first time the both of them, her 2 hands on the sill and him behind. Well, it was clear what they were doing. And I said so to Ben, and he said to me, "Do you think, Nuala, that they're trying for a baby?" And I did wonder. And I thought, yes, her face had that ring to it, that determination, and I was happy for them. I was, but at the same time, I'm thinking, what age was this woman? Not much younger than Marie in her last year with us, so no spring chicken. And this was her first. Well, we were barely out of school when I had Marie. And every day they were at it now. And her face was a beacon to me up there. Though you're not seeing the whole of her with the angle, and you're not seeing him doing his bit. But her face, yes, always. Her 2 hands on the sill and the window open. Did I say the window was open? So you're hearing them too. Not loud, but if I closed my eyes, sat there, the window open, the breeze kissing me like it kisses her, and my eyes closed, I could detect a hollow thud, repeating this unearthly sound I could not place, until I had Ben listen too, and he said to me, "Nuala, it is her knees, with the force of him. Her knees are knocking up against something just under the window, like the wall or a small radiator. And I told him to go on and finish his work. It was useless. No sense for this sort of thing. No capacity for grace. But later I did say to him as well, no, I think, yes, a small radiator. It was. And he was friends with me again. I felt sure they'd stop come winter, or shut the window at least. But no, there they were, same face reaching up, same streetlight tangling in her short breaths, and behind him, barely seen. Ben said, she must be frozen, so she must. If he were a gentleman, he'd swap with her, so he would. And I said to Ben, how would that work? And he said nothing to that. Instead, away, taking the hump, which is typical, which is well known. Even our Marie said that last night in the hospital. Didn't she warn me? It was sensitive. Her lying there, broken, all tubes, barely speaking. Didn't she touch my hand and whisper, go easy on Daddy now, won't you, Mum? Sometimes you don't see the whole picture. Did I listen? I did not. But I made him his echinacea tea in the cup that I like, and when I handed the cup to him, our eyes woke in kindness to each other, and we were friends again, as we should be. And that night, I slipped my hand into his pyjamas. And once he got over the surprise, he said he liked it. I knew he liked it. Of course I knew it. I know him as well as I know this carpet beneath me with both feet planted. Of course, it was that same winter when that first day passed without her face and without him behind. And I thought, is it her time already? I had not seen the bump, but with the angle, maybe. So much of her has been hidden. And a second day gone, and it got to be a concern with me. A third day, I said, something is not right. There is a problem. If they've stopped, there's a problem. And Ben said, well, there must be a way. And I said, they've never been away before. And Ben said, why are you crying? Wouldn't I stop now with the crying? And around me, Ben's arms, his heat. And a fourth day, and a fifth. And I was for calling round the hospitals, though Ben said, Nuala, that is foolish talk. I don't know you for that kind of talk. I am fearful of it. But I had the phone in my hand when I looked, and I saw, and I stopped, because I saw her. Yes, and the relief crushed me. But it was not the same. It was not the same. There were these differences. Well, he was not behind, I could tell, and she had only one hand on the sill, not her customary two hands. Instead, the other was angled up with a cigarette, strange in her fingers, like she was cradling a small bird. And suddenly, I knew nothing had come of it. Nothing at all. And I felt, here. And more days rushed at us, and still only her at the window, and him nowhere to be seen. Until that last night, on my way to bed, I did see, and Ben did as well, though he pretended he didn't. She had his suitcases in the street, all his clothes spilling out. And later, much later, I could not sleep. and I heard. And I went to the window, and below, calling up to her he was, demanding such a noise that I could not bear. And I said to Ben, I said, she better let him in. She has no time for this. They cannot be unkind with each other, not now. They need to be back to it. Time is not on her side. And didn't I say as much to our Marie? Didn't I, Ben? When she was for waiting, though you said no, though you said that hurtful thing about my beak being where it should not be. And didn't she wait? And didn't she wait too long? And then was taken? And what is left of her now to us but nothing? And Ben was silent. And in the morning I went and I sat again. And it wasn't long before I glimpsed her briefly, side on. And I saw tiredness all the way through her. So strong, it put me to sleep. And later I woke unrested. But Ben was there and he smiled at me and he said, Nuala, come look, the suitcases are gone. And I did come look. And the street was empty. And I looked up, and at her window, I saw only closed curtains. And I will not see that. I refuse. I will see it all, the whole picture. So I look up again, but higher up, right up beyond where I had been scared to look, where there is nothing of you, nothing. And that is so very cruel, considering I am still here, as I have been, as I continue to be. And light is drawing from the sky. And finally, I see that one star, pale in the dusk, as if arrived too early. God love you, my angel. Hold on.
Well, thank you very much, Maureen Beattie, for that powerful performance.
Yeah, thanks, Maureen. That was great.
It was so powerful and poignant, and I felt quite emotional watching you. Thank you so much. So now it's my turn to attempt to be an impartial interviewer, which is quite difficult when I live with the man to my right.
Hello.
We sometimes deliver a lecture together in one of the courses in which I teach at the University of Edinburgh called the Bible and Literature, and I'll interview him as a poet originally from, or a playwright originally from Northern Ireland who now lives and works in central Scotland with me, and all of my students go, they're suddenly very interested. So, Michael, I've got a couple of questions for you, and I'd really like to hear more about the kind of context for the creation of this piece, So We're Afraid. But first of all, I thought I might ask you a question that I asked the panel of poets yesterday, in which we've been exploring with all of the writers at this conference. And that is, what does it mean to be a Catholic and a playwright, a creative person, in your particular geography of the world amidst a secular culture?
Well, my particular geography of the world, growing up, while I know I live in Scotland, was Northern Ireland, and I would push back on describing that as a secular culture. It didn't feel very secular. It felt very ecstatic most of the time. I would suppose my experience was, and I think it's the experience of a lot of Northern Irish people, is that you're born with a political obligation that nobody asked you about, and that overrides any sense of innate spiritual component to these words. So to think of myself as Catholic, growing up in Northern Ireland, it was to think of myself as answerable for a tribe or for a contingent of people, but also at the same time feeling quite extracted from it, because my family upbringing would have been I was raised by a single parent who was Protestant and came from a Protestant family, and had only had me baptized Catholic because she was by her own claims, which sometimes vary, but she was homeless at the time and was living briefly with a Catholic family who insisted that I be baptized Catholic. So it was a very strange kind of exchange of who it was that I was answerable to. It always felt like, rather than a direct relationship with my spiritual self. And certainly whenever I got to Scotland, it felt like I couldn't escape that to a degree, because a lot of those tensions carry over into Scotland as well. To describe yourself as either Catholic or Protestant is to describe yourself as being an advocate of a politics, and so it's always been for me a difficult thing to reckon with, but nevertheless something that is always there in the writing, something that is informed and shapes the imagery that I reach to, and the kind of stories that I try to tell are often echoes or shades of stories that have deeper Catholic resonances.
Well, I mean, that certainly comes across in the titles of your recent work. There's been Akada, so the Binding of Isaac. There's been This is Paradise, which has clearly religious overtones. And then Sore Afraid, there's the experience of the shepherds in the Gospels. So I'm wondering really what it is about the Christian story that captivates you in your work. Is there anything particular that you have latched onto?
Well, I latch onto the sense that we are all playing with the same materials for such a long time, and coming like a phrase like "sore afraid" is not something that we use in everyday speech, but it feels resonant to me. It feels like there's something being expressed there. That I felt spoke to the kind of character I was writing in this piece, but I think even more than discovering it in the sense of its use in the Bible, I was trying to think back to like where do I really attach that phrase to, and it was to a very profane Dudley Moore song called "Jump," which is done as a parody of a hymn. And a person is described as being sore afraid at one stage. And I find something incredibly compelling about that way of describing a state of being. And in this text in particular, I feel like the character is in a place of fear. She is in a place where she doesn't have the answers that she needs, and she is applying a rationale to something that she's only seeing in fragment. It made me think of an angelic visitation, I suppose, in that, like, how could you understand that? How could you begin to comprehend this being or creature or kind of divine representation in front of you, and to be left only with this sense that there is this intense fear, this unknowingness, this inability to name the thing that is before you, that felt compelling.
And I think that's quite a good way of leading into the next question, actually. I wanted to ask you about the context for the creation of this piece. I mean, of course, I remember the context of the creation for this piece because I was there, but I'd like you to say a bit more about that.
Well, you were deeply, deeply preggo.
I was very pregnant at the time.
Yes, and the world was unable to function in the way that we had grown accustomed. We were all in our houses. So there was a lot of fear in the environment, but also specifically for us, there was this hope and this transformation that was happening in very close quarters. And yeah, definitely the anxieties of parenthood and the anxieties of what that means, and the sense that by inviting new life into the world, you're also inviting the pain that will be in their life, and the pain that will be in your life, but along with the joy was kind of mixed into this the creation of this work, and then being asked to be part of a series of work commissioned by the National Theatre in Scotland to as part of a group of writers to put out these little beacons for everybody while they were locked away was kind of the compelling reason to write this particular piece.
And a beacon appears in the piece, doesn't it? There's that the pain and the grief that the speaker Nuala is feeling, mixed with love for her child, and that deep need for that to happen again, for parenthood to happen again, or she imagines for the person that she's watching. It's all mixed in.
Yeah, she has a deep anger at her child as well, for not leaving any part of her, I think and so in this piece, it's a resolution of that anger, really, is playing out. She wants something of her child to be in the world, and she creates, through this very strange couple across the road, this kind of link back to her daughter, who she's lost.
And maybe we should just finish off by saying that the piece that you wrote after this was written with your baby daughter strapped to you.
Yes, a very useful writing tool. I would recommend for anyone, if you want to get some work done, and your child will only sleep when attached to you, is to use that for very focused laptop on a chest of drawers while a baby is very gently breathing against you. It created some very compelling work, I feel, but that's an hour and a half long piece, and it felt maybe that would be a bit extravagant for here.
Well, we're under time constraints today, so I think we'll draw to a close there, but I would like to thank Michael John O'Neill again, and of course thank the Great Maureen Beattie for her lovely performance this afternoon.
Thank you, Mary.